All right, with that, we're moving directly into our next session with Natalia from Verifone/2Checkout. I know that acquisition merger has happened in the last few months and things have changed a lot, but I'm really looking forward to your session today. Natalia, are you ready?
Yes, if you can hear me, I'm ready.
Awesome. I'm going to add your slides here to the deck if you want to go full screen, and then we'll bring it up and I'll just let you take it away.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Derek. Thanks for having me here. And hopefully today I'm going to give you some tips from the payments company of how to get your company global. And just a few words.
Sorry to interrupt. It looks like we don't have the right slides. I know when we tested it backstage, we had the right slides showing up, but I just see the PowerPoint. So I think what you need to do is unshare your screen, and then you have to share a different browser window now because you've got the individual window. Yeah,
sure.
No big deal. It happens all the time. This is the usual of web presenting.
Of online presentations. I know, yeah. I know. So let me try doing it again.
Let's
and
see. That's
do you see it now?
It's not full screen yet. So I think what's tricky here is that you've got to go full screen, and
yeah, I did. I just did.
It's not showing full screen here. It's showing just the PowerPoint one. So maybe share entire screen is the best option for you, actually, if that works.
I just did that. Technical. If something technical can happen to a person, it's most definitely going to happen to me.
It's funny because it did work backstage, but I definitely, we can do it in a non-full screen presentation mode. It's not too big of a deal for everybody watching. We definitely just want to make sure we're getting the content across, of course.
Sure.
Go ahead and unshare and reshare.
Yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it this one last time, and then if that doesn't work, then I'm just going to do non-full screen. So I'm sharing the screen now.
Share full screen.
And here it comes.
And then go ahead and go full screen.
Is it working?
It's still this. Have you gone full screen?
Yes.
Okay, then it's not working. Go ahead and exit full screen, and you can give the presentations here in this back end mode. No big deal.
All right.
It'll be totally fine.
Let me just try to do this.
And I can even make it a little bigger on the slides if we need to, but I'll keep you in the shot for now.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I'm out of here. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks a lot, Derek. Thanks, Ecom Tech, for having me today. And basically, again, what I'm going to tell you about today is hopefully how to take your business online globally, or if you are online already, maybe some of the things to pay attention to. And a little bit of a background about myself. My name is Natalia Shidakulova. I run digital sales team for 2Checkout, now Verifone. As Derek mentioned, there was an acquisition happening about a year ago. We're now part of the Verifone family. And just to give you a little bit of perspective of what Verifone is, around 46% of all the non-cash transactions are done through Verifone infrastructure. After this session, you should be able to answer a bunch of questions. For some reason, I don't see. Oh, good. It's coming. After this session, you should be able to answer a bunch of questions. First of all, why you should be caring about authorization rates, why you should be tracking those, and what is the impact of those, and how you can change that. What localization and why localization is essential to your business, and why you shouldn't mess with taxation and compliance these days. Now, I'll start with something very, very technical, but it's very, very important. Talking about authorization rates. I just am trying to, no. Let me start with a little bit of context why we're having a conversation that we're having now. Basically, e-commerce now is valued at about 5.4 trillion in 2022. This number was about 4.8 trillion 2021. And the 2021 number has been a lot accelerated by the COVID. So it's a growing trend, and that's why it's super, super important. And now, why go global outside of your country is because, for example, if you're selling right now in the United States, well, 85% of all that money is happening outside of the US. So, and just to give you a little bit of a perspective of the key e-commerce markets as of 2020, that's pretty much how it looks. China being leading the pack, followed by the US. And what's interesting is that the mix of countries changes. So in 2019, when we looked at the data, it was actually Brazil that was in the mix, and it was very on top of the market going into Brazil. So that's why going global in the regions where you see your business in is super, super important. Also, when you think about e-commerce in general, you need to really pay attention to your customers, and you need the ability to capture those customers across any channel that they prefer on their terms, using things that they are used to, or otherwise your competitors are probably going to be in front of you. And that's why it's super, super important to talk about some of the things related to having global e-commerce on terms of your shoppers, buyers, and customers. And first thing that I want to talk about, and again, I'm coming from e-commerce and I'm coming from payments perspective. I've been in e-commerce for 6.5 years already. And let me speak about something very technical, which is authorization rates, and hopefully you'll take use of that. So why are those important? Authorization rates define the success of your transactions. It's basically the number of successful orders divided by the overall order attempts. Never is the authorization rate 100%. There are a bunch of reasons why transactions are declined. It can be hard declines, meaning the fraudster is coming into you and the card has been reported as being fraud. Or there can be soft declines in case, for example, I don't know, the user doesn't, or the shopper doesn't have sufficient funds on the accounts, or he didn't enter the card number correctly, and something like that. And so there are a bunch of reasons that impact authorization rates. First of all is the payment method that is being used. If you're using typical cards, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, or you're using e-wallets, or you're going through online banking, or I don't know, something else. It's the country where your business resides. Basically, it's called the merchant country. It's basically the country that is used to sign the contracts with the payments company. It's the shopper country. So basically the country that is used where the shopper is coming from, if you're global. The order value, and think of it as I'm B2B SaaS company selling globally, and I have a product that is valued at $40,000. Well, a lot of it is going to be rejected and declined, right? It's the MCC code. And basically the MCC code on our side, on the side of payment processors and payment companies, shows the level of risk. And MCC code is defined by the payment company when you come to them. And basically on the typical risk profile, there are standard MCC codes, and it's the transaction type. And basically the transaction type is whether this transaction is the new acquisition transaction, or it's an automatic renewal, or it's a manual renewal. Those are going to have different authorization rates. Now, why are they important? They're important because authorization rate depend on whether you're doing local processing or global processing. And basically, the stats that I want to share in this slide is we've run a test. We've recently launched Indian local processing for international credit cards. And we've run a test in the same set of merchants in the mix, looking at what happened in transactions that with Visa, MasterCard that were processed using an international processing versus what happened afterwards for the same period of time when we launched local processing with a local acquirer in India. And the results are amazing because when you look at the international processing numbers, they're about 12% lower than the local one. So the recommendation number one from the payments company would be, if the market is important for you, we would recommend you go with a local processing in this market. Not talking about like local payment methods, I'll get to that in a second. But just by having this local processing capabilities, a local acquirer in the region, you can gain for 100, potential customer, at least, I don't know, from anywhere from 5 to probably 25% more real customers, right? Or purchases. And when you are able to identify the key geographies for your business or the key markets that you want to go to, the ideal setup would probably look as having, a local processing per your key location, which is basically if you're selling into Europe, you'll have a European acquirer and you'll sell locally in Europe. And same goes, for example, if you're, going into India, we would recommend you having Indian acquirer with one of the companies available in the market. And then another thing that would impact authorization rates is a lot of those little things that payment companies offer. One of them, the most impactful one currently, is something that is called the Dynamic 3D Secure, which is basically the ability for you to set second factor authentication. That's what 3D Secure is on the country level. And what we've seen in the past running tests in different geos, it may have some really positive impact on authorization rates in some geos. Like, for example, in Japan, it typically leads to 4.6% increase in authorization rates, whereas in some geos, you're going to see a tremendous decrease with 3D Secure, so you have to make sure it's deactivated. Now, going next, another thing that I would like to talk about is localization. And localization is kind of a very wide term. A lot of people, when they think localization, they think about translating basically the website and the content. From our perspective, there is more flavor to localization. First of all, it's about localizing your content. And I stress the localizing part because the content may differ depending on the country or the locale you're going into. So it's not translating per se, but it's actually making sure that the user understands what you're selling. Then it's going into local currencies, and that would have both the impact on authorization rate and conversion rates. It's having those local payment options that the users are very used to paying in, and having local support. And so a few tips and tricks into basically content and language, currencies, and payment options. What we've seen throughout tests as we're running e-com stores for our customers is it's best not to force the language, but it's best to take the language from the browser. Imagine I'm coming from South Korea, but my browser is in English. So it's best to display that, website or shopping cart in English. And for the currencies and payment methods, it should actually be triggered by the IP geolocation of the customer. And same goes for local support. Now, talking about all of that all together, what we've seen is that customers are very likely to buy from you if you're selling in the language they prefer and using the currency they prefer and the payment methods. And I'm just going to share with you a few examples of the tests that we run with our existing install base into how currencies, local payment options, and support plays out into the picture. First of all, on the currency, you might think that, users will buy from me in US dollars because everybody knows dollars, and that might be correct. But some banks, some issuing banks, and some geographies have restrictions for the transactions and for your purchases, potential purchases, be processed in local currencies. So what we've seen when you transition from one currency only, being euro, US dollar, or Great Britain pound, or any other, to multi-currency management, it actually can lead up to 25% increase in those authorization rates that we spoke about before. Now, just to give you a little bit perspective of how we look at local payment options, when you look at your key geos, make sure that you actually offer those payment options in the geographies. And just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, what is that goes beyond typical Visa, American Express, PayPal. So there are a lot of varieties of payment options available globally. If you look at Europe, there are about, I don't know, 20 plus different payment options that are widely used. And just to give you an example of one country in Europe that has a huge adoption of a local payment method, I'll focus on the Netherlands. And basically in the Netherlands, there is this payment method that is called Ideal. We've run a bunch of tests, and Ideal, both based on the general accepted benchmarks and our benchmarks, constitute for over 50% of all the online orders that are being placed. And now if you look at, what happens if a company that used to sell in US dollar only starts selling in euro? There is one very specific example of the company that is called 123 Form Builder. It's a SaaS solution. And they've seen an increase in conversion of about 123%. You may argue that it's 23% is very large. We've run other tests with other companies of displaying Ideal as the potential or possible payment method in the Netherlands, and it's still an increase in conversion of 26%. So the statement that I would like to make is local payment options work, even in Europe that has a very high adoption of something that is considered to be international or standard payment options, which is Visa, MasterCard, American Express, PayPal. Now, let's talk about some geos that do not have a huge adoption of those. And another one that I would like to bring is Brazil. So in Brazil, exactly the situation that I described earlier, which is their cards, even though they may be issued with the Visa or MasterCard brand, would not be accepted if you try to charge them either in a currency outside of Brazil real or with a payment gateway or payment provider that is based outside of Brazil, which is called cross-border payment provider. And so another really fun fact about Brazil is that in online payments, about 60% of all the shoppers prefer using an option that is called installment. Installment, and I have a slide coming next, is basically an option where you imagine you have 1,000 Brazil real purchase. And instead of paying 1,000 right away, what you would do, you would give your shopper a possibility to split it into equal payments over a period of time for a small fee. And basically what happened, you as the merchant receive the total amount full right away, but the shopper would pay them in on a schedule that they've selected during their purchase process. And using installments and using local currency for Brazil, here's another example, can lead up to 25% in conversion rate increase. Now, because I've shown you a slide with the largest e-commerce countries before, one of them was, the huge one was China. So I decided to spend a little bit of time talking about China. So China is also very peculiar because the adoption of credit cards and PayPal is small. And the way they are used to pay is by using Alipay, UnionPay, or WeChat, which Alipay and WeChat alone constitute to up to 55% of all the online orders. And then again, based on a lot of the tests that we've run, when you have those payment options, and the thing is they don't necessarily have to pay using them, but with having them in the cart or along the purchase process can lead up to 48% increase in conversion rates. And this is just an example of a localized experience that you would see in China, seeing the local language, payment options in Chinese. Now, the last point that I would like to tackle is not very fun, but it's very, very actual. There's been a lot of tax and compliance changes recently. The last one, the very big one that I can think of is PSD2 that's been discussed for a long, long time and then keep postponing and then introduced since the beginning of this year. And also what we've seen from the tax compliance perspective is that those have been accelerated by COVID because governments do provide a lot of support for both the businesses and the citizens. and they have to look for money, and money typically comes from taxes, and that's why those tax regulations are being strengthening and tightening, yeah, it's just been this big trend coming, and we expect to see a lot of changes in the coming years. Basically on tax, remember that it's not just the ability to calculate the tax correctly, but also all the registrations that you need to take in place to both remit the tax and report it correctly. And I'm not sure about being tax compliant in all the markets, although this is our recommendations and this is how we act on behalf of our merchants. But at least having tax compliance in your key geographies is really, really strong recommendations. And I just want to bring up some of the recent tax changes that are coming in different geos. One of them was in India, where you might be subject to tax depending on what you sell, and also based depending on where you're coming from. So the tax rate is different depending on whether you're a locally registered business or international one. And also even for regions and geos where you feel comfortable about tax, don't forget that in some of them, like the US, it's very, very complex. And we've recently done a audit of a UK merchant selling SaaS products, and they were selling SaaS products throughout the United States, but also in Illinois, where they thought and SaaS products are not taxable. So basically, they decided not to collect tax, sales tax in Illinois. Well, the fun fact is that the city of Chicago, which is also in Illinois, imposes tax on SaaS. So you finally become liable for tax in that one geo and location. And going through the world, I think our company now has about 60 to 65 different countries where there is certain tax liability, either for registered businesses or for international businesses. And it's a growing trend. Like, I don't know, Taiwan introduced VAT recently. There, Canada, and I mean, just because of the need to collect money, I guess it's just something that we've seen as the trend in e-commerce. And the last point that I would like to talk on and cover on is the payment method, payment model flexibility and complexity. And it's kind of two sides of the same coin. So on one side, it's very, very flexible. On another side, it's complex, because without a couple of shots of vodka, you probably wouldn't be able to kind of understand the whole thing. So if you still struggle with understanding how the acquirer is different from payment facilitator, is different from payment service provider, is different from merchant of record, and what is the gateway, and what are local payment options, and all of that, you can always reach out to me and we'll try to figure it out together. And I'll share all I know about that. And just to summarize on what I've mentioned before, here's the global sales action plan that I've prepared for you. First of all, the first recommendation is measure your authorization rates in key markets that matter to you, where, let's say, 5, 10, 15% difference would make a huge difference to you in terms of revenues, and check if you can make any improvements in those markets. Second, make sure your website checkouts are localized. Again, language, ideally fed by the language of the browser, currency and payment options, local payment options displayed based on the IP geolocation of the user, and beware of this complexity of tax and compliance to avoid any further liability. Also, on the topic of complexity of different payment options, just a quick note, we are going to be posting a blog post in our blog. You see it on the screen. With that, I would like to thank you and see if there are any questions.
Amazing.
How am I doing?
Thank you so much. Yeah, we did great. We're perfect on time. And I think those takeaways at the end are super crucial. And this is a great key takeaway for the idea of international expansion and going global. How do we localize our payments? Like you said, language, options, and of course currency. And we know that 2Checkout can help us get that done. So thank you so much.
I didn't say that.
Oh, it's fine to say that. We know when to go to you. In fact, when should people reach out to you, and how should they get in touch with you?
So my email is available. I'll send it over to you. I don't know if you can post it in any way.
Yeah,
and please reach out to me if you have, like, on the authorization rates, if you would want to look into our benchmarks. We can build them together, very specific based on those criteria that I mentioned. If you need any strategy around or any consultancy around going into some very specific local market, we have tons of expertise in terms of what payments are used, how it impacts, whether they accept international or you have to go global and stuff like that. So yeah, feel free for that.
Awesome. Perfect. We'll get that email address from you in just a second and share it in the show notes and in chat with everybody here.
I'm typing it right now in case you don't have that.
Awesome. Throw it here. Yeah. I know I have it in my email. We'll go ahead and have questions about international transaction. Let's share it here in chat. Perfect, Natalia. Thank you so much. And I got blurry again right as I turned my camera on. I don't know why. We'll see you at another event.
I thought I was drinking something.
Yeah, I know, right? Everybody's gonna feel a little out of focus here. So I need to get off screen.